During the neoclassical period, academic circles remained fixated on linear perspective and Renaissance rules of the creative process. However, this linear perspective actually limited vision by restricting how we see the world and prevented broader understandings by denying reality in favor of illusions. The truth was simple: we're looking at a flat surface, as flat as any wall. Edouard Manet emphasized this in his paintings by playfully mocking traditional perspective, deliberately placing objects in the background, like the figure with a bowl, in complete defiance of conventional perspective. Rule breakers are the ones who get attention. This theme runs through modernism with its anti-establishment thinking, going against the grain, refusing to follow the crowd. That's how progress happens. And that's actually what we're going to talk about in this lecture. The Matador figure, for instance, is strikingly flat. This flatness is significant because Manet wanted to challenge these conventions. The Luncheon on the Grass is another example that drew criticism. Manet challenged both the conventions of flat painting and the pretentiousness of the art world. The wealthy would arrive at the museums in their chauffeur-driven coaches, dressed in their finest clothes, to view paintings of nude women. A striking contradiction. Manet responded by depicting ordinary people having a casual picnic with a nude figure present simply because that was the artistic standard of the time. Through this approach, he questioned why nudity was acceptable in an idealized artistic fantasy, but considered shocking in everyday scenes. He challenged viewers to confront this disconnect between artistic tradition and reality. The painting also featured an oddly placed figure in the back that defies linear perspective, serving as another example of Manet's flattening technique. From top to bottom, the painting maintains the same flatness like a wall. Though the dead matador appears to be painted with impressive foreshortening and perspective, Manet emphasizes that this entire work exists on a flat canvas. He deliberately draws attention to this reality. The painting isn't an illusion or a deception, but simply paint on a flat surface. This artistic choice could be interpreted as the following statement: if the matador is dead, perhaps that traditional phase in painting is dead too. It's time to move forward. The Impressionist movement emerged from artists being influenced by their immediate perceptions of the world around them. Monet's work, for example, was shaped by the Industrial Revolution. His paintings often feature idyllic landscapes with rivers alongside streams and trains. Their smoke plumes blend into the clouds and atmosphere. Now, over a century later, we see how the Industrial Revolution continues to impact our lives and, the climate crisis. Many artists of that time clearly recognized that the industrialization, despite its benefits, had significant negative repercussions. Monet's primary interest was color. This was crucial to his work. He focused on capturing the impression of nature, light, and space. He would repeatedly paint the same subject: haystacks, rivers, buildings, churches, and especially water lilies, under different lighting conditions, different times of the day. These reoccurring themes became defining characteristics of the Impressionists, who concentrated on depicting modern, everyday life. Shortly after came Post-Impressionism. Though the distinction between the two movements can sometimes be confusing, we can spell that out in this simple chart. Post-Impressionism became more subjective and personal than its predecessor. While Impressionists used loose brushwork, Post-Impressionists adopted more systematic approaches. Interesting, though these modernists were rejecting academic traditions, they developed new systematic approaches to color theory and symbolism that differed significantly from, let's say, the neoclassical techniques. A prime example is pointillism, a systematic technique developed by Georges Seurat. His massive painting at the Art Institute of Chicago demonstrates this method perfectly. Pointillism uses countless tiny dots to create images similar to CMYK printing used in modern color magazines, for example. In CMYK painting, tiny dots of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black combine to create a full range of colors when viewed. Seurat applied this principle to painting. Instead of physically mixing yellow and blue to create green, he placed dots of yellow next to dots of blue, allowing the viewer's eye to blend them into green. This systematic approach to color was revolutionary for its time and influenced modern printing processes. When you examine Seurat's work up close, you can see these meticulously placed dots that form his systematic technique. For Paul Cézanne, paint itself was his primary interest. This sensual medium was used for capturing the passage of time, showing how one form flows into another at different moments. In the south of France, he repeatedly painted Mount Sainte-Victoire, visiting at different times of the day to record the shifting light. A painting made at 3:30 p.m. would look entirely different than one made at 5:30 p.m. the next day, as both the light and time had transformed the scene. Through his distinctive use of paint, emphasis on flatness, surface texture, and unique brushwork, Cézanne worked to convey this sense of time and movement. His technique profoundly influenced modernist development as 19th century gave way to the 20th century. Belle Époque, Joie de Vivre, Fin de siècle, Art Nouveau. These terms might be familiar to you, particularly Belle Époque, the beautiful era, often associated with modernism and the vibrant social gatherings and streets filled with art and music. While this period wasn't always as idyllic as imagined, it was marked by tremendous cultural energy. This distinctly French, particularly Parisian phenomenon at the turn of the century embodied the joie de vivre, the joy of living. It was also characteristic of the fin de siècle sentiment, a double-edged perspective as the 19th century drew closer to the 20th century. There was optimism about modernism and new ways of thinking as the 20th century approached. Though this enthusiasm would later be tempered by World War I and World War II, despite this, it remained an exciting time of diverse perspectives and cultural innovations. It was a unique spirit of the time, a unique zeitgeist. Art Nouveau exemplifies this period's creative spirit. More than just gallery art, it influenced industrial design, appearing in Paris metro stations, graphic design, posters, and magazines. The movement spread beyond Paris to Vienna, where artists like Gustav Klimt incorporated his decorative style into his artwork. This new approach to ornamentation found expression in architecture, notably in the Majorca House. In London, the arts and crafts movement emerged with political dimensions. William Morris, responding to the Industrial Revolution's mass production and sweatshops, criticized machine-made goods and their lack of craftsmanship. He established an artist collective dedicated to handcrafting everything from fabrics to wallpapers to functional household items, each with its own distinctive design. Similar artistic developments appeared in Germany with the Jugendstil and in New York with Tiffany Studios, not just the jewelry house we know today, but originally famous for decorative glass lamps. This period from 1900 to 1914 saw rapid artistic evolutions, with numerous movements emerging. Each group of artists sought to capture their interpretation of the zeitgeist, of the spirit of the time, through their distinctive artistic approaches, through their creative process. Fauvism was heavily influenced by Impressionism. The word fauve means wild beast, reflecting how these artists used their color in bold, unrestricted ways. They weren't careful or precise. They freely applied their bright colors and didn't necessarily match reality, unlike traditional paintings such as the Grand Odalisque. In this painting by Matisse, we see a fascinating play on our perception. The decorative patterns and colors of the table blend seamlessly with those of the wall. Matisse intentionally merges the table into the background, making it difficult to distinguish where the objects begin and end. Even what seems to be a window could be interpreted as a painting on the wall. This visual ambiguity prompts viewers to question their perception. Are they looking at a realistic scene, or is this more about the bold, Fauvist-style use of color? Moving beyond Matisse and the other Fauvist artists, we turn to Expressionism. This movement demonstrated that art wasn't merely about creating beautiful images. Instead, artists sought to express their emotions and feelings, often depicting the imperfect world around them. Many of you have probably used Edvard Munch's The Scream as an emoji, but Munch created other powerful works like Death in a Sick Room, which captures the loss, sadness, and harsh realities of life during this time. His work revealed not just humanity's beauty, but also its darker aspects. Katie Kulwitz offered other striking examples of Expressionism. As a printmaker, she brought a political edge to her work by depicting the struggles of working-class people during the Industrial Revolution. Her subjects were desperately poor and malnourished, lacking basic health care and housing, and chronically overworked. She chose to work in etchings, which allowed her to produce multiple copies and share these images widely, bringing attention to scenes that wealthy people might never witness from their comfortable homes. Her work frequently featured tragic images of mothers and children, often showing people who were overworked and unable to access proper health care, either due to poverty or its unavailability where they lived. On the flip side of that, there were still many people who enjoyed the beautiful life, this Belle Époque. For example, The Blue Rider depicts a horseman thinking, "I'll ride through these fields with the wind in my hair and being one with nature. Everything's beautiful." However, this was not the reality. Things weren't beautiful and wonderful for everyone. The sentiment of this Blue Rider inspired the movement Der Blaue Reiter, a group of German artists who were influenced by the Matisse paintings and the Fauve's use of color. Unfortunately, many of the artists who were part of this Blaue Reiter tragically died in World War I, including Franz Marc and August Macke, who was killed at the age of 27 in the first month of the war. In about 1914, a fascinating transformation happened when Kandinsky entered his darkened studio at night. Looking at his work depicting rivers and buildings and factories with chimneys, he suddenly realized he couldn't see the subjects anymore, only shapes and forms. This revelation led to non-objective abstraction, pure form without reference to any person, place, or thing, just circles and triangles and colors like red, yellow, and blue. Meanwhile, in Russia, artists like Malevich were pursuing similar ideas through the 010 movement, which symbolized their position at ground zero, the beginning of a new artistic generation. Albert Einstein perfectly captured the zeitgeist of the first decade of the 20th century. His relativity papers emerged alongside dramatic changes in art, not just the Fauvists and Expressionists, but a broader shift in how people viewed the world. Einstein's papers were rich with visualizations. One powerful example is a thought experiment about a person throwing a ball up and down. From the thrower's perspective, the ball moves straight up and down. If that same person is on a moving train, they will still see the ball going up and down. But to someone standing far away watching the train pass, the ball traces an arc through space because the train's in motion. This simple example shows how Einstein's revolutionized mathematics, moving beyond traditional Euclidean geometry to reveal the deep relationship between time, space, and moving objects. This new way of thinking resonated widely, even among non-physicists. It paralleled other transformative changes at the beginning of the 20th century, like the rise of the automobile. While combustion engines existed since the 1850s, they were rare and expensive until 1908 when Ford began mass-producing the Model T. This democratization of transportation transformed society. People now could live in the countryside while working in the city. Faster travel by car or train shrunk distances that one took a day to cross. These changes profoundly influenced how people thought about and experienced their world. The rise of fast transportation in cars, trains, and the first aeroplanes, the widespread use of electricity, new telephone communications, and Einstein's relativity all ran parallel to the birth of Cubism, one of the defining art movements of the 20th century. In France, Picasso's early career focused on painting guitarists and harlequins, circus performers, progressing through two distinct phases, the Blue Period and the Rose Period. A turning point occurred when he visited an exhibition of African masks in France. These were artifacts brought back during the colonial expansions. These remarkable objects presented faces in ways that departed dramatically from the neoclassical traditions like the Grand Odalisque. Picasso was captivated by the masks' powerful expressiveness and incorporated their influence into his paintings. From this inspiration emerged Cubism, an approach that transcends mere abstraction. It portrayed subjects from multiple points of view, simultaneously, side by side, a front view, a side view, at the same time. This revolutionary perspective aligned with Einstein's theories of relativity, speed and motion, demonstrating how perception itself could shift. Along with George Braque, Picasso continued to evolve, eventually incorporating new techniques like collage into his cubism. At the same time, in Italy, the futurists like Boccioni and Balla explored how speed, movement, and time were transforming humanity's worldview. Die Brücke, in German, the bridge, was an influential group that emerged as a collective of artists who positioned themselves between two eras. They saw themselves as standing on one side of a river, the 19th century behind them, the 20th century ahead of them, serving as a bridge would carry art forward. While there is much debate about whether Kandinsky, Malevich, or Hilma af Klint created the first completely non-objective abstract artwork, this competition reflects a time when artists raced to push the boundaries of art and culture. This was the beginning of what we call avant-garde. The term avant-garde, which we often associate with art, actually comes from the military terminology in French meaning the front line. These were the first soldiers to enter battle, either facing defeat or breaking through and capturing the objective. Artists saw themselves playing a similar role in culture, serving as if they were on the front line. Their work could inspire either hatred or absolute love. In response to the 50 years that mark the beginning of modernism through the early phases, the first decade of the 20th century, here are a few questions to consider that you can respond to in the discussion group.